Hey there, I just wanted to pop on really quick before the video. For reasons I don't entirely understand, the quality of the footage, even though I did my same filming setup, same everything as normal, it's like really low quality, which is really annoying, obviously. I've done what I can with iMovie, because iMovie unfortunately is not super capable of fixing footage like this, but I've done what I can to kind of make it look a little better. I'm not sure why that is that way, but thank you for watching. Okay, bye. That is cold. Hello there, my name is Hannah. If you are new here, welcome. If you are not new, welcome back. I had something else filmed to try to push out before the end of the year, but then I got a little ambitious, I guess, and I'm gonna do part one of my December books first, and then one more video, and then it'll be the end of the year. So that's the plan. Where this like extra goose of ambition is coming from, I have no idea. I can only assume I'm like subconsciously avoiding something else I really should be doing. Hopefully I'll be able to do this pretty quickly today. I'm only going to talk about 3 books today. Let's just get started. The first book that I finished in the month of December was Under the Banner of Heaven by Jon Krakauer. The audiobook was actually narrated by Scott Brick, which was kind of funny because I had just finished listening to the audiobook for Foundation like maybe a week earlier, and he also narrated that, so that was funny. It's like, wow, he has range. Okay, I picked this up on account of the upcoming FX TV adaptation of this that's going to star Daisy Edgar Jones and Andrew Garfield. And this book is technically usually shelved under true crime, but it really could also be like a sociology book or a religious history book. So it's the true account of, in 1984, a young woman and her baby daughter were murdered by her brothers-in-law, and they believed that they were told to do so by God, as they were members of this kind of off-branch of fundamentalist Mormonism. So Jon Krakauer takes this like single horrific incident and really just zooms all the way out back to the very, very beginnings of Mormonism, and even right before, to kind of look at how there's this thread of violence in the culture of this religion all the way back to its inception. The subtitle is A Story of Violent Faith, and that's absolutely apt. It basically posits that like this specific, could seem isolated incident is kind of like not entirely unprecedented in the whole umbrella of the history of Mormonism. So this book was super fascinating. I kind of already knew like the barest basics of like Mormon doctrine and like the beginnings of Mormonism. I listened to All American Prophet a lot as an adolescent, so safe to say I know my stuff. But I also remember in 2007 when the Warren Jeffs polygamous fundamentalist compound was raided and he was arrested, and kind of the gruesome, salacious details of what all was going on there were in the news for weeks after that. That was in like 2007, but I definitely remember it. So a lot of the basic information was not entirely new to me. However, I was not familiar with the Mountain Meadows Massacre, which is very important in this book contextually, and I did not know about the murders of Brenda and Erica Lafferty, the mother and her baby. This book, it's kind of a brutal read because it is true crime, and Jon Krakauer doesn't really mince words at all, which isn't necessarily what you want an author to do when they're trying to convey like the madness and the violence and the degree of the violence. The last third to a quarter of this book is kind of dedicated to the trial of Ron and Dan Lafferty, who were the brothers-in-law who killed Brenda and Erica. It was kind of this weird catch-22 that the state found themselves in when there was the argument going of sanity versus insanity and fitness to stand trial. So basically the state did want to argue that Ron was sane and was fit to stand trial. And they had kind of a hard road to do that, because they basically had to argue that Ron hearing words directly from God and God giving him a hit list basically was not that far removed from any other person having like unprovable religious convictions. And that worked. Ron's whole thing was basically, yes, I did kill them, but no, it was not a murder because God told me to do it, and the law of God supersedes whatever the state of Utah has going. And the court was like, that is a very interesting thing to say. Yeah, like I said earlier, Jon Krakauer does not mince words, really. This book kind of is like an indictment, not just of these like fringe fundamentalist groups, but kind of as of Mormonism as a whole and the whole history and culture of it. And he argues that in a religion where a key tenet is members of the faith communing directly with God, you kind of open yourself up to all manner of self-proclaimed prophets and splinter factions. I will say, I mentioned earlier that Jon Krakauer, he takes this incident and zooms way out and kind of goes off on little side stories, and sometimes it felt like we were getting so far away from the point, because this isn't a very long book, but he covers so much information here that sometimes it just felt like I don't know if this particular story is necessarily relevant to this like whole inciting incident of this particular book that he's writing. I would also love to read an updated version of this. I think this was originally published in 2003, so the audiobook was probably recorded in 03 or 04, and that definitely does show in some of the material. Sorry, Ruthie's shaking. It definitely shows in some of the material, like when talking about like the kind of religious personality of much of the United States, he talks about how current President George W. Bush skews evangelical. And you're like, that is what was going on then, yeah. And when Warren Jeffs is mentioned, it's kind of just in the context of like he's the newly appointed prophet of this FLDS group in Hilldale. In this edition I just bought, there are some author's notes and some addendums, which that might cover it, but I just feel like there's so much has happened since 2003, 2004, especially involving Mormon fundamentalists. But yeah, this was super interesting. All right, I managed to spend 10 books talking about that minute. Oh, also, I am wearing my Wham Christmas crew neck. Probably should have addressed that earlier. All right, the second book that I finished in December was The Maid by Nita Prose. I got the e-arc on NetGalley. I believe it comes out right at the beginning of January, so it's not far off. What piqued my interest about this book, and the reason I requested it in the first place, is that the film rights have already been sold, and there is in all likelihood going to be an upcoming film adaptation, which is going to star and be produced by Florence Pugh, the absolute queen. And also the description really grabbed me. It's described as a Clue-like locked room whodunit, which sounds amazing, but is not completely accurate. So basically the pitch of this book is that Molly is our protagonist. She's our point of view character. She's very unique. She is a hotel maid at this very high-end hotel, and one day she goes into a regular's room to clean it, and there is a dead body there. So it's a pretty simple premise. This book was pretty fun. Molly is such an interesting protagonist. I honestly don't know if I've ever, or at least recently, read a point of view character that's quite like her. She is just so good, and she's so kind, and she sees the best in everyone, and she's not really suspicious of anyone, which is obviously really unique for this kind of like whodunit mystery. While that does make her very good and makes her very lovable, it also makes her very naive, and it makes her kind of a frustrating POV character to read. So, you know, we're just kind of basically looking over her shoulder as she's experiencing all of this, and we as the reader know that she's clearly missing something, like in people's behavior and the things they say to her. Like, she's obviously not clued into what everyone is saying and thinking and doing when they're in private. So she's not necessarily seeing things for how they are, but it's like she's so naive that it's like, I don't even know what I don't know, you know? And also, Molly takes great pride in working at such a fine establishment as I think it's the Regency Grand. She takes a lot of pride in her hotel, so she's very upright and very proper, and she speaks and thinks the same way, which is kind of to say she will say 10 words where 3 words would have sufficed, which again is super unique and is innate to her character and makes sense. It just makes the reading experience kind of clunky. It does make for some really funny moments too. There's a surprising amount of humor in this book. I will say, because she is so naive as a point of view character, it feels like we, the reader, are so in the dark for so much of the book that it kind of feels like it takes a while for it to kick in. It's just kind of her wandering around, hoping everyone's not sad about the dead body, and then like it just takes a while for it to actually kick into gear. I did really like, again, Molly is such a fun character, and the whole cast of supporting characters are also super interesting. This book does that thing that I wish more kind of mystery and thriller type books would do, is like, there are nice people in this book. That sounds like a weird complaint, but I think of like The Maidens, which is a book that I specifically cited. Like, every character is so like cartoonishly evil seeming that it's just like, I think everyone here has killed someone at some point. But I really liked a lot of the supporting characters were really nice and like behaved like real people, which was really, really nice to read. I won't say too much else because it is a kind of thriller whodunit. It's borderline cozy mystery. I've never read a cozy mystery, so I don't know what makes them cozy per se. But this feels like it might be it. But yeah, definitely worth the read. And like I said, I think it comes out right at the beginning of January, at least here in the US. And the third book that I finished in December, and the last one I'm going to talk about today, was a reread, and that was Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. I did listen to the audiobook on Libby for this reread, which was in anticipation of the HBO Max series that was coming out last week. It started, and that is my bread and butter, is knowing what books are going to be movies and TV shows. And somehow this, which is one of my favorite books, completely passed like without my noticing until I was scrolling on my For You page like a month ago, and someone was like, yeah, this trailer for this new show came out. It's called Station 11. It's like, what? My bad. I remember when Emily St. John Mandel was doing a press tour for Glass Hotel, and the interviewer asked her what she thought of people reading Station 11 like right in the thick of COVID, like the first outbreak in like spring, summer of 2020, and like what she thought of people reading this for comfort. And she said, I have no idea why someone would read this book for comfort right now. And she is not wrong. So I'd initially read this, I think in like 2018. It was a couple years ago now. And absolutely loved it. And I kind of underestimated how upsetting this would be to read in a COVID time, especially the scenes from like right as the outbreak is happening. The scenes at the airport were like actually like really, really upsetting to listen to tell my sad little COVID story. So at the outbreak of COVID, I was still living in Ireland. I had just gotten a job bartending at a theater, and obviously bars and theaters were like the first things that closed. So I immediately lost my job. So I was already like kind of, crap, what do I do? Like, so I was already like, do I just cut bait? Do I go home? Because I'm gonna run out of money if I just stay here. And I happened to be up late it was like 2 in the morning and I was up late watching Glee on Netflix for some fucking reason. And I refreshed Twitter and everything on Twitter was saying like, oh, they're like gonna close the borders. Like they're not gonna let people fly into the US anymore. And I immediately went into panic mode. At that time, I had no one knew anything. I didn't know anything. Yeah, that was like 2 a.m. Irish time. And I called my parents and basically I was like, should I come home? And they said yes, absolutely. I literally booked the first flight I could find that was that day, that was direct and would get me somewhere in the Midwest. As long as I could get to like the middle part of the US, I probably would have been able to figure out my way home. So yeah, 2 a.m. I refreshed Twitter, and 2 p.m. I was on a flight home. And then after my flight home, I still had another like 5 or 6 hour drive from the Minneapolis airport to my parents' house. So much of like the panic, the airport at that time, you couldn't really find masks anywhere, so I didn't have a mask at all, but I was still flying and I was super scared that I was gonna get sick on the plane. In the miniseries in episode 3, there's a scene where Miranda is on the bus and someone coughs on the bus, and that was absolutely my experience on the Airlink on March 13th of 2020, trying to get from central Dublin to the airport. That was the longest 24 hours of my life. Rereading this isn't like a dig on this book at all. This book is brilliant. It's because it's so good that it like, it cut deep here. Yeah, it's still so good. It's so affecting, obviously. But also the theme of survival is insufficient like really hits home. In this book, humanity is like fighting and clawing to keep going, but it's just like, why would humanity keep trucking on if we don't try to preserve what makes us human? Art, emotion, community, all of these things that the Traveling Symphony is like keeping alive. But yeah, this was such a good reread. Definitely really stressed me out in a way I was not prepared for, especially right now in this time of Omicron, like finishing this audiobook and seeing, the great SantaCon outbreak of 2021 was like, oh God. I do still love this book. I am caught up on the first 3 episodes of the miniseries. It's really, really good so far, especially episode 3. I was a little weepy watching episode 3. It does seem like they're making some pretty substantial deviations from the book, which again is not a bad thing. But yeah, I'm just very curious to see where they're going with that. That's my Station 11 non-review and my sad little story. So yes, thank you for watching. I will have this video and then hopefully one more video before the end of the year. And then I have the first week of January, I'm on vacation, so you will not hear from me. I think that is all I have to say. So thank you for watching and I will see you in the next one. Bye.